All right, I'm gonna make this pretty short and sweet introduction. I just wanted to do a couple of, say what's going on May, June on the calendar. There's lots of stuff on the calendar. There's some demo days that are not club related, but there are some demo days if anybody wants to go look at different boats. I think Get Outdoors as well as
Great outdoor vision.
yeah, Geo, two G's. I'll get confused. Anyway, so there's some demo days out there, and then our demo day is May 30th. Don't forget. I'm going to send out the president's note about to get some. Make sure we can keep that on club members, get it out there. And then Chip, I don't know if you're looking for volunteers still. If you're good with all your volunteer.
We could use some safety boaters.
Okay, but it sounded like it looked like everything else was pretty much. Is starting to line up as far as demo day. So
it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
And then the other thing I saw about demo day was to make sure we had enough, if we have a lot of new paddlers, to make sure we had enough wreck boat types. So we weren't having new paddlers and so that was the other notes which I'll send out.
Put the safety boaters in
the safety boaters and advocates. There you go. We have a cleanup. Moonlight Title?
Absolutely. Friday, May 29th, 6:30 in the evening. We'll clean up the boat ramp and then go paddling.
Yep.
It'll be fun.
Friday night?
Friday night after work.
Yep. He's not offering any food, but something.
There is talk about going to Durham after someplace out near South Point afterwards for a late nightcap.
Or nightcap or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. So that cleanup. Wait, so we have two that are planned cleanups. Ronnie's going to do one later in the year, and then Kevin's doing one, and we're still looking for somebody to volunteer for a third cleanup somewhere in the middle of summer. So anybody wants to help volunteer clean up the ramp, just let me know, and we'll get you fixed up with bags and gloves and stuff. Stuff. Your favorite word.
No, yours.
What else is going on? So we have two symposiums coming up, Lake Symposium and Ocean 15. Lake Symposium, June 5th through 7th. If you're signed up for Lake Symposium, we have now, I don't know if you got the email out today, but we are doing the sign up for the classes this year. We're going to do it as a survey, and the survey is on the main webpage. There's a link on it, so you can go through there and sign and choose 6 classes. If you run into, it makes perfect sense to me how it's set up because I did it. So if you get in there and it doesn't look like it makes sense to you, or I need to change something so it makes it easier for the rest of us, don't hesitate to say anything. I can fix it still.
That's up now?
That's up now.
That's up now. Yes.
So if you go in and look at it and see, but if you're in there and you do your class selections, it doesn't give you a second chance. Make sure you go and get the class that you want first. Your first options 1 through 6, and then once you're signed up, you're signed up for it.
It has the list of all 19 classes with a box, and you will decide which 6 classes you want to list, 1 being the one you want most, 6 being your last option. We are trying to put you in classes 1, 2, and 3, but we at least want an option to get you in something else should 1, 2, and 3 not work out.
So make sure your first 3 options are something that you really like to do, and we'll do our best to get you in those first 3. We are looking for a volunteer to help us with finding catered dinner. Somebody who can come, who will search out and find a caterer for us, and or we can help organize the Saturday night dinner. But I think other than that, we should have enough volunteers.
Well, we can always use volunteers to man the registration table Friday night, Saturday morning. And also Saturday morning this year, something I would like to try is to have, because Saturday morning is the people that just don't get there Friday night come in and it jams up the road, is to have people to unload your boat while you sign in and just lay it over in the grass and put your gear there so that you sign in and move your car and then come get your stuff down to the beach. So I'm looking some volunteers for that, and that's probably mostly the guys. But I won't discriminate. If you're a woman and you want to do it, I'll surely take you.
I can do registration since I'll probably have to do paperwork.
Okay. So if anybody wants to offer their services to do anything, please let me know.
Okay, so just let me know.
Any questions, general sign up for that since we got right here? The other symposium, Ocean 15, right now, it has very, very low attendance. It only has like 3-4 people signed up for it. It's a good event. So if you are interested in any kind of, it's intercoastal as well as coastal, isn't it? And he's got a full gamut of instructors, very experienced instructors for any kind of coastal conditions. So if you're interested at all, please sign up for that. And then in Huntington Beach, 522 through 25 Huntington Beach, that's Carolina Kayak Club. We're paying for the camping. All you have to do is show up, free camping for a whole weekend down at the beach. You can't beat that. That's
Look out this weekend.
look out. I'm sorry, Rich. Look out this weekend. Sorry about that, Rich.
Y'all should do this. I'm doing every one of those events.
The trip leader training in July.
Oh, it's not July, but so the trip leader training, the club is sponsoring or trying to help anybody who is organizes trips or anybody who wants to organize trips. We are sponsoring trip leadership training. Dawn and Fern White are coming up, and they are going to put the class on for us at their expense. We're paying for their hotel, but they're basically giving us the class for free. So if you are interested in learning to be a better trip leader, how to organize and get people going where they're supposed to go and understand what you're supposed to be doing, it should be a very good class, and the club again is paying for that. So please sign up for that. And prerequisite for that at the symposium, there's the either Dawn or Fern, depending on how many people we get signed up. There's a prerequisite for that at the symposium. And that'll be, if you do that, it'll be both days for trip leadership training, and then July, I don't have the date, it's the end of July, that the trip leader is training. That's another weekend. So it's the symposium 2 days, and then July another weekend. And then you'll get a trip leader certification, an ACA certification. John or Rich, anything else?
That's all the club stuff, but the biggest sale of the year starts on Friday here at REI for 10 days. You get your coupons at home, and then their garage sale is June 13th, I think he said.
You just got the sales pitch on there.
Yeah.
Any questions? Else? Okay. Dawn is going to give us a presentation. She has 190 slides. She's going to talk slower than I do. So I don't know that Dawn really needs an introduction. So the challenge will be.
All right, so, and I have this new, figure out where I point this thing to make it work.
It's login.
There we go. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I love to paddle. Anybody who knows me knows I love to paddle. And what I like even more than paddling is kayak camping. In fact, I can't even decide if I like camping more than I like paddling, but I like both of them so much that the two together just make doing trips absolutely wonderful for me. I retired a couple of years ago, and I made sure when I retired that I was going to have a paddling budget that was going to let me do all these things that I have on this huge bucket list that was this long when I retired, but it keeps growing. I don't know how that is.
You're going to have to live forever.
No, it's just crazy. So, but when I retired, the biggest challenge was finding people to do trips with. Even before I was retired, it was hard to find people because then it was about vacation time. But, I had to find people that would do multi-day trips. And when you're doing a week-long trip or a 10-day trip or a month-long trip, it's a little different than a weekend trip. I mean, you have to have people that you sync with. You have to be on board with the similar interests and the same kind of paddling style. And it can be varied, but everybody has to have the same expectations when you leave the beach about what is this trip going to be about. I'll do trips where we paddle 8 miles a day and we just drink beer and wine all night long and camp and have big breakfasts and not even get on the water until 10 o'clock, and I love those trips. And I do trips like this one with these two guys that I paddle with, where we are up at 6 and we are on the water before 8, and we paddle 25 and 30 miles a day, and we come back and we each make our own dinner, and we're in the tent before dark. And I love those trips too. So it's just a matter of hooking up and everybody sort of agreeing with what you're doing. So here are these two guys that I hooked up with a couple years ago that have become regular paddling partners of mine on some of these bigger trips. Dave Rochelle and John Crown. John I've known a number of years because he does the Water Tribe races that I do every year. And he actually even partnered with our Jason Smith in a double one year in the North Carolina Challenge. So I've known John for quite a few years. He lived in Wisconsin. When he retired, he moved to Augusta, South Carolina, and met Dave Rochelle, who lives there, and they're in the same paddling club. And I actually heard about Dave through Lee Toller before I even met him through John. It becomes kind of a small world, these people that like to travel. So here they are showing up to my house in Chapel Hill, and we've done a number of trips together. So this trip was in last summer. The year before, they attempted this very same trip. The two of them and I think another friend. And the northern side of our Royale is very cliff-like and very few landings, and they hit bad weather and they couldn't get around the north end. So their goal is to go back and get it done, which actually affected how we paddled this trip. So I'll sort of explain that, because their goal is to get around that damn north side as fast as they possibly could and then have a sigh of relief. So those are the three guys. Has anybody paddled in the Great Lakes?
Well,
So Great Lakes, for all of you who don't know, Lake Superior up on the top. I have been lucky enough, I think in 2005, I did a trip, the upper peninsula of Lake Michigan up to the Mackinac Bridge, and that was wonderful because all of the population in Michigan is in Detroit and other cities, and nobody has summer homes way up there. I mean, it was just like a wilderness area. I even saw the Aurora Borealis one night when we were out there. So Lake Superior's been on my bucket list for a long time. It's a series of interconnected freshwater lakes. It actually makes up 21% of the world's surface area by volume. I mean, it's all connected here by the St. Lawrence River that then goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. And the lakes are so big that they're ocean-like. So Lake Superior is the northernmost lake. Here is the Apostle Islands, the archipelago, and over here, up closer to the Canadian border, is Isle Royale, which is the island that we circumnavigated. So, like a few facts, just because I thought I would try to have a little education here as well as a slideshow. Lake Superior is the largest lake. It's the world's third largest by volume. I've heard of Gitchigami, but never did I know what Gitchigami was. But Gitchigami is the Ojibwa term for Lake Superior. So isn't there a song, Gitchigami? And that means Lake Superior, and I didn't know that. It's famous for a number of shipwrecks because of their storms that they get in the winter, and the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which also has its song, is one of them. Their annual storms can get as high as 20-foot waves and even as high as 30 feet. And they're worse than our ocean waves because it's not ocean swell. It's lake swell, which is very short period waves, which makes them even more dangerous for anybody. The surface temperature varies seasonally. It was really, really cold. The water was incredibly cold when we were there. Typically 30% of the lake freezes, but I don't know if you remember the news from the winter of 2013, the whole lake froze over completely. In fact, I think I have pictures we'll get to. The whole lake froze over. It didn't thaw until early June. We were there in early July, and the water temperature was just barely 50 degrees. I mean, it was warm as could be in the air, but the water was it was even too cold to drink. You know, we filtered and drank the lake, and oh my gosh, your teeth hurt trying to drink the water. So one of the things about a trip like this is a lot of planning goes in it. And luckily I wasn't the one who had to do the planning. Since these guys had done the trip before, they kind of knew what they wanted to do. The problem with planning on a trip like this is the plans have to be really flexible. But we had to make a lot of reservations. One of the things about trips that Dave and John and I do is we're so cheap we won't stay in hotels. If we have a tent with us in the car, we're going to camp. Because why should we pay for a hotel if we have our sleeping bag and our tent right in the car? So we stay at these incredibly noisy KOAs that are like right off the highway along the way just to save money. But we have to make reservations. The ferry, you have to make reservations to get out to Isle Royale. When we came back, we stayed, before we hit the Apostle Islands, we stayed at a campground, we needed reservations. The Apostle Islands, you have to make reservations. They're very busy, a lot of people are there. You have to make reservations to camp. So, you know, we started with all these reservations knowing that if anything happened, the reservations blow up in smoke and you hope you can make adjustments. But you have to start with somewhere. So this was sort of our initial plan. Our trip would go from 7:20 to 8:04. We knew we would have 4 days of driving. We knew we'd be 4 nights car camping, 2 days on the ferry and more driving. We figured 12 nights of camping wilderness. We packed for 12 days of food. We wore dry suits and we filtered drinking water from the lake, and all of that worked pretty well. This is not a group that you share cooking with. I've done trips with people where every night one person is responsible to cook meals for everybody, and it's wonderful, and you get really nice meals because everybody wants to outdo each other. These guys eat differently. One guy only eats soup. No wonder he weighs 50 pounds less than me. And then another guy only eats freeze-dried foods that he does himself in his dehydrator. And so we eat very independently, and that just works for us, and we all know that's what it's going to be like, so it is. A fun thing, when we did our Everglades trip with Ginger and Rich and Dave and I this year, and we did it, and the trip we did to the Everglades last year with Ginger and Rich and John March, we all did our own meals, but we said everybody has to bring a surprise for one night. And that worked beautifully. Some of us brought a dessert surprise. Rich brought out a tray on his hatch cover that was hors d'oeuvres. So ways of doing different things for trips. So I'm going to try to interject little expedition stuff throughout this talk, because once we get to the pictures, we're just going to go through them really fast. I hit the wrong button. Okay, so 20 hours of driving. B was our KOA along the way. Incredibly boring. The only highlight of the whole drive was 5 miles off the Mackinac Bridge. We got a flat tire in the van. And the spare was shit. So we were really a little bit of a problem. Luckily, it wasn't too far. The spare lasted us enough to get to the next gas station, which turned out to be AAA rated, and they just were really nice and helped us out. But it was a really, really long drive. When we got there, where we went to was Houghton, and we camped at a campground there, and this is the ferry that takes you out to Isle Royale. And the only way to get there is by ferry or seaplane or boat. The ferry is a 6-hour ferry ride, long ride. It's $120 round trip, and you pay an extra $22 to get your kayak. So, you know, this is not an inexpensive trip in some ways. But on the ferry, they had talks. I mean, there's a lot of research that goes on Isle Royale, and so there were 2 college professors who gave a slideshow during the ferry ride. They are studying immature loons, and they come every year at this time of year, and they're doing counts, and they're counting these loons, which we heard non-stop throughout the whole trip. I mean, it was just a wonderful song. Then when he was finished, you had another college professor with his graduate student who was working on her dissertation, and they were studying some of the old mining remnants of the island. And they had this whole historical presentation of the island. Then the last talk was one of the forest rangers giving us a talk on leave no trace principles, because everybody on this boat was going to be a hiker, a backpacker, a camper, or a kayaker. And it made the 6 hours go by so quickly, a wonderful slideshow. The ferry only operates 2 times a week. You get there, you're kind of stuck there, and they're very crowded. This is, I blew up some of the slides, it's going to make them not be clear. This is a picture of the ferry. It's called the Ranger 3. It is able to take motorboats as big as 20 feet. So a lot of fishermen will actually have their boat. There's a big crane on the ferry, and they'll take their huge motorboat over there and stay for a week of fishing. This is how everybody gets their gear on. It's just incredible. You line your boats up in the corner, and then you put all your stuff in these baskets, and they just put them all. It's incredibly efficient. And then once they get all these baskets on board, they carry the boats on board, and then when they get where they're going, all this little train of baskets come out, and you just grab your stuff. And there's a lot of stuff, right? Because every backpacker has a huge backpack. All of the people, the rangers and people who stay on the island, only can get supplies by boat. So it's a very efficient way to do it. Okay, so here is a picture of Royale. When the ferry came in, the ferry comes in at Rock Harbor, which is way up here in this corner. We ended up camping the first night at a house I'll tell you about further down. We paddled all the way around here for the first night, and we paddled to Todd Harbor the second night, another spot the third night. We stayed 3 nights at the corner and then back. And you know, I did this trip a year ago, and I can hardly remember some of the details. So, but the island, all of these brown lines are hiking trails. Really a lot of backpackers all over the place, and it's known for these inland lakes, which are supposed to be incredible fishing. A little history of Royale. So it was created by molten lava coming up cracks in the Lake Superior seabed. You know, it's been years and years of exposure to glaciers, so it's very rocky and ledges and arches and all this wonderful shoreline. They say its earliest humans have been noted at 2000 BC, and the Indians would come over from the Canadian border to mine copper. There are remnants still on the island of these early fishing camps, and still remnants of a lot of copper mining that they used to do, but none of it was ever deemed feasible because it was far to get to, very seasonal. You couldn't do anything in the wintertime. They attempted to do a good bit of tourism by creating these resorts in the late 1800s for the steamships that were going down the Great Lakes. Didn't last very long. It was made a national park in 1931. There are still some family homes because it used to be habited, at least during the summer season, and there still are occasional homes that are grandfathered into the families until the last living family member passes away. Sort of what they did to our Outer Banks when they turned our Outer Banks into a park. No electricity, no running water on these. They're very rustic looking cabins. They're just the kind of thing that you wish you could live there for a season and just be there, you know. The island is 45 miles long and 9 miles wide. It's heavily populated with moose and wolves, which are well studied, except the wolves are dying out. And the problem is the wolves are the only natural predators of the moose, which are not dying out, and our population is growing. In fact, 2 years ago when they had that total freeze, 2 wolves crossed over to the mainland and didn't come back. And the other problem with the wolves is their inbreeding has created a very sickly wolf. They're not a healthy population at all, and there's this huge controversy. People want to populate new blood wolves on the island for no other reason than to provide control of the moose. But it's controversial. It's not been approved. Whoever has to make this approval, has not given approval, and it's this big to-do. But it's a real problem. There's no roads anywhere on the island, all foot and boat. It's a haven for backpackers, kayakers, and divers, and even with that cold, cold water, we saw a number of diving boats and people who were diving. What is really interesting is it's the least visited of America's national parks, but it is the most revisited of any national park. And I thought that was really interesting. And when the park ranger gave a little presentation on the ferry, and there were hundreds of us on the ferry, she literally said, how many have been here before? More than 50% of the people on the ferry had raised their hand. I mean, it was really surprising. It's only open from May to September. Okay, so the rest is a lot of slideshows, and some of these slides I have something to say, and others we'll just go through really quickly. One of the crazy things that happened was when we got off the boat, John and Donna Buckley, who I didn't know who they were, none of us had ever met them, were there to greet us when the ferry came in. Well, it turns out that they used to own an outfitter shop in Michigan years ago, are now retired. They spend 4 months out of the year as volunteer rangers in Royale in summer, and 4 months out of the year as volunteer park rangers in the Everglades, living on a houseboat deep in the Everglades in the winter.
Got it made.
Oh, do they have it made? Or I want to be them. So they knew John and I from the Water Tribe, because every year they see our race go through the Everglades, and they've been reading about us for years, unbeknownst to me. They even had Warren Ritchie's book with them at the ferry station without a paddle so that they could get our autographs. It was like, I didn't know who these people were. It was like I was a star. It was just crazy. And so they insisted that they would paddle with us over to where they're staying, and they would give us dinner, and we would spend the night at their house on the grounds. So what they do is, for the 4 months that they're there, they man this old fish station. And from the ranger station, tourist boats from campers and hikers and stuff come in every day, and they give a tour of this fisheries. And I mean, it's just the coolest place. It's a museum in and of itself. I stayed in this little cabin. It had mosquito netting all around it. It was just so cool. They also run the Lighthouse Museum, which is the museum that tells the story of all shipwrecks that have occurred in Lake Superior. So it was like so cool, and they met us, and they had dinner for us, and they put us up, and then John paddled with us the first day for 4 or 5 hours, and then he said he would hear from the rangers, because they all talked to each other all over the island, when we were coming back, and he would meet us on our way back, and he wanted us to stay the night again at their place, which actually was a fun dinner, because we decided we would make them dinner, and we took all of our leftover food from the trip, and we created this incredible buffet. I mean, it really worked. How it worked, I have no idea. But because for them, they only order food once a month, and sometimes it just was great. So anyway, this was a real treat for us to stay there, and who knew? So now we'll just, this is John, this was his, and the other thing is they own Kruger canoes. And they had Kruger canoes there, and that was another connection to me, because I have a Kruger canoe and often do those in my races. All right, so I've broken this up into little segments, and here are a few of our paddling pictures. This is David. David, I think this is an old Mariner. It's a really strange kayak. It doesn't have skeg, and it doesn't have a rudder, and he adjusts it by moving the seat back and forth. The seat moves. They don't even make them anymore. I mean, it's just a very unusual boat. He has since bought a new NDK Pilgrim. But it's a very big boat, and it carries a lot. This was the first thing I saw when we left that lighthouse, and I thought, oh my God, if that is what we're going to be looking at every day, worth it. And this was exactly what we looked at every day. It was just beautiful, just incredibly beautiful. John, whose water tribe name is Strip Builder because he has made over 13 strip-built kayaks of his own design. And that's one of his boats that he built. So it's this island in the middle of a lake, and there you can go through little cuts, and there's no reason not to stay close to shore because there's nothing out there but water. So we often would find ourselves taking little cuts and going around rocks and stuff. I mean, it was just kind of fun ways to paddle. And everything was lush. Green, there's old growth forest on the island. Everything was green. It's just absolutely beautiful everywhere we went. We were joined by one of John and David's friends, Scott Evans, who is from Wisconsin, who they have paddled with in the past, and he was a great addition to our trip. He was probably the most fun of all. You'll see pictures. He'll show you that he always wanted out of the boat. And he was like a little monkey. If he saw something he could climb, he was out doing it. So you would often have, and a lot of these pictures I took, so you could get a sense of size. So there would be a paddler there because you couldn't even understand what these cliffs were. But even out of the rock is always growing greenery and flowers everywhere. The water was clear. You could see almost 40 feet down to the bottom of the water. It was always clear. There would be little caves. Of course, nothing like the sea caves we're going to see when we get to the Apostles, but the rock formations were just absolutely beautiful. It just always amazed me how you had just all this growth coming right out of the rocks. Another little slot that we found, and we would just see if you could come out or not, and we had time to just do a little. You often heard water coming off the island into the lake, but you didn't always see it. This was one of those opportunities to actually see sort of water streaming through from the top. There's a quite high ridge that we actually hiked up on. We'll get to those pictures. It's just, everything was just beautiful. So for navigation, I'm going to put a plug in for my nav class. I decided to plug this chart in here. So I always have a GPS. I'm always going to be something of a GPS girl, but now it's more about mileage and speed, and sometimes I'll identify the camp spots on it. But we all had charts. In fact, I meant to bring my chart and I forgot to. But for Royale, it's really easy. You just keep landing on the right. I mean, it's just an island, and you're just going around it, and there's nothing difficult about navigating around the island. The Apostles is a little harder because it's this huge archipelago, and you have to figure out what island you're looking at, and it's not always as easy as it sounds when you see 6 islands, and some of them look further than others, and there's optical illusions and everything. But one of the things that I'm learning over time is navigation. 10 years ago, I would have told you only guys navigate. They're just born with that sense. It's not a girl thing. I just was bound and determined that I can't tell right from left half the time. God, east and west is just ridiculous. So it was just never my thing. And I've been taking a lot of training classes and other things where I've had to learn navigation. And I've learned an interesting thing, that when I force myself to look at the chart and use the chart to know where I am and follow where I am, I've developed this whole new awareness for what is around me. Whereas before, I never really had that. I always knew where I was going, and I was always looking ahead at where I was going, but I was never looking around. I was never noticing that the buoys were being pushed this way, or maybe just the way the water was moving around rocks. I mean, I just never paid attention to the little tiny things that are going on. And now you do that. And the more you play with charts and learn how to use charts and learn to read charts, you study that more, and it changes everything about your trip and what you're doing. So, I have a how to read a chart class. Some of you guys were in it, and I think we're offering it at the Symposium on Sunday for those that are going to have had enough of the water by Sunday. I think it's kind of a fun class. I've tried to make it fun. We play a few games, I don't know, and it's a good way to start. So if you start using a chart and really using a chart, it will change what you're doing. And I'm even going to put my Jordan Lake chart on the boat from now on because I think you can just gain a lot from it. Okay, camping. So camping on the island, there were definite spots that were identified as camping. They didn't have picnic tables. It was just often a cleared away area, and often you couldn't even get the boats to the cleared away area. You'd have to sort of put the boats up on the shoreline and hike into this camping area. And as you can see, he's wearing a head net. We definitely had bugs. We had mosquitoes and we had black flies. But these are just a few. God, was it wet. Wake up in the morning, everything's soaking. We always were hanging stuff up to dry. And we had some wet nights. We had quite a few wet nights. This actually campground had a picnic table. It was one of the hiking campsites. There's John. See, that sometimes that was the only place we had to put boats. I mean, there was no tide, so we didn't really worry that the tide was going to come up. But we would have to find a trail to walk into a clear area where all the bugs were. Isn't that always the way?
Dawn, did you have raccoons?
those rocks?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Are there raccoons out there?
No, I don't think we ever worried about raccoons. Now that I think about that, there were a few beaches, not very many, and even this is a pebbly beach. And that actually wasn't camping, that was just a little break we took. But there were nice spots to set up tents. You know, that was a pretty cushy spot once I got rid of back away from all those boots. Here we managed to get boats up a little bit higher. So one of the places we camped was a larger campsite, and it was manned. It is this point, and there were two volunteer rangers there who were a really good friend of Donna and John Buckley's, who also owned Kruger canoes, who they immediately called when they saw that we were on the island to let them know we were coming. But there were fishermen also staying at this campground, and they gave us some of their fish that they couldn't eat, and so we had a very nice fish that night. But the guy who ate the soup didn't eat the fish. Should make fish soup. Flowers everywhere. There wasn't a square foot that didn't have a flower somewhere. They say there are over 600 flowering plants on the island. There are over, I think I read 65 different species of orchids. I mean, it's just incredible. And they grow on everything. Everything. Including little rocks out. And these are just pictures I took after the fact. If I thought about giving a talk, I would have probably taken different pictures. Everywhere you went, there were just these flowers. This was one of the hiking trails. And the flowers would grow right out of the rocks. Right out of the rocks. And sometimes the rocks were in the middle of the lake, and they would have flowers growing out of them.
Hey, Dawn.
It was just beautiful.
Were there ticks?
No, I don't remember ticks. And I don't remember them telling us that we needed to worry about ticks.
That's great.
But it's been a year. So I don't remember that. You know, gear stuff. We all had expedition kayaks, and 12 days of food is a lot of food. What we did was we packed for 2 different trips because the Apostles trip was going to be broken up by car ride and the ferry ride. So we were able to pack half of what we needed at one time and add a bag of clean clothes for the next trip and bags of food for the next trip. And we were able to split it up. But even then, you know, we went comfort. You know, I had my 2-man tent instead of my 1-man tent this time. And we all had a deck bag to keep cameras and nice things. I mean, I normally don't like paddling with a deck bag, but it's just so convenient when you have a camera and a few other things you want to get at. We shared first aid and repair kit because, you know, it's kind of smart if you're going out with a group. Let's not be really redundant in a lot of our stuff. Let's have enough, but there's no reason to have everybody carry a pump and everybody carry this and everybody carry that. And they were amenable to that, but everybody carried their own stove, and I think everybody carried a spare stove because they were doing their own thing with group. You know, when David and I camp, one of us does all the water for the coffee, and the other person just has to put their mug out of their tent, and there's coffee water. Not this group. They only make enough water for their coffee. Anyway.
And you like them?
Trips they do. We've done some pretty amazing trips. I mean, you just adapt. It's all compromise, right? Backpacking is the most popular on the island. We saw a lot of backpackers. And when we were at the ranger station, it was full of backpackers. We never saw a paddler on the water. We did see paddlers at the ranger station. We saw boats there. It looked like maybe they'd be going out in a day or two, but we never saw any kayakers on the water, which I thought was kind of surprising. So this is, hiking. So talking about hiking. So we did do a couple of day hikes while we were on the island. This starts the trail. Now I have to fix it. It'll only take a second. The button that does this is right under the download. Moose tracks. We never saw a moose and we never saw a wolf, but we did see moose tracks on our hike. So that was pretty cool. I was glad I got that picture. We took one short day hike that went to one of the inside lakes, which are huge, absolutely huge. That's my laptop saying it's going to run out of power.
Yeah, we'll get going on the slide.
Is it plugged in? I'm pretty sure it's plugged in. So here's the other rangers that we met, the friends of John and Donna. We got to the campsite and we were going to stay there for 2 or 3 days because we had gone around the island so fast that we had time on our hands. And so they said, oh, we'll take you to the best hike on the island. You can't even get there if you don't even know where it is. Okay, you know. So they took us on their boat. We spent one whole day with them. They took us on this boat, and we did this ridge hike on the northern ridge of the island. And it was just incredible. It had arches. These are all natural formed arches. Here's our big tourist shot under the arch. I think one of the fun things was during this whole hike, everywhere we looked, we saw blueberries, and we were starved for fresh fruit. So the whole hike was done like this, picking up blueberries. This waterway inside, it was just, so this is Thunder Bay area across on the Canadian border. It was so clear that we could see, and this is some famous landmark, but I can't remember what it is. It didn't look like it to me anyway. Some lion thing or something. Anyway, but the hike up here was just absolutely gorgeous. A sailboat coming in into this big bay. So we were so lucky to do that. Weather. We had better than expected weather. We had a couple of foggy mornings. We had one big thunderstorm that took us off the water earlier, and we saw it in the camp, one of the camp pictures where we had all the tarps up. That was a big thunderstorm night. We only had one afternoon with pretty big winds and seas. We didn't have any cameras out that day, and we cut the day kind of short. When we did the Apostles section, we had really beautiful weather too, and only one high wind day that had us kind of changing our plan. This was one of the diving boats. But this is a little bit of a foggy morning when we were out out there. It was never so foggy that we couldn't go out. A nice eagle sitting on it. I saw a lot of ducks that I couldn't tell you what they were. Loons everywhere, and you heard the call of loons 24 hours a day. I mean, it was just, and it was a
Spooky at
wonderful
night.
sound. Wonderful sound. And then, so now we're sort of at the end of the trip, and these are from our last day of paddling. This is probably one of the windy days that we had. We sort of snuck in around some rocks and just made it fun. This is John Buckley had come out and joined us. That's him in the boat taking us back to his camp. Another little arch, and of course this is Scott's going to climb the arch. Wait for some fun pictures. This is sort of the end of the trip. We're coming inside the bay now that goes to Rock Harbor. That's sort of the little walking bridge that in the island they have artists in residence, and you can apply to be an artist in residence and stay there the whole season. And you can be a singer or a painter or a poet or whatever is your artwork, a weaver, whatever is your artwork, and your only requirement, and they house you, so you have free housing in a nice little cabin, is that you do something to give back to the community. So the last night we were there, we stayed at John's house, but then we moved over to the ranger station and camped there to wait for the early morning ferry, and we had dinner in the restaurant, and then we went to their auditorium, and there was a musical. One of the artists in residence was giving a performance, and it's very small town feeling. I mean, after you're there for a few days, you start knowing people by first name and stuff. I mean, it's got that really nice sort of small town feeling. So on this last day, though, we were rushing back because this was going to be the storm, and we actually made it right before anything happened. That's Royale. So now, how are we doing? So now we'll get back on the ferry, another 4-hour car ride, and from Houghton over to where the Apostle Islands are. So here is a picture of the archipelago of the Apostle Islands. We saw Sand Island, Oak Island, Stockton Island. We were supposed to go to Outer Island, but that was when the wind really kicked our butts, and we ended up just sort of coming back and paddling around these islands. We camped out 3 nights and paddled around the islands a lot, and it was very crowded. And there were a lot of people there. There were even motorboats in some of these sea caves, which was just very upsetting. And it was like we went to a party and they forgot to tell us the dress code, because you had all these outfitters with people who've never paddled before sitting in their kayaks wearing bathing suits, and we're wearing our dry suits. And it's hot. It's August now, and we come up for lunch, and of course we're just dripping wet, but the water's not even 50 degrees. I mean, anyway, but we were good little paddlers that we are. You know, we know the rules. There's 21 islands and 12 miles of mainland that's part of the Apostles National Park. And I read that there were more lighthouses than any other national park area, I guess for that specific area, 8 towers on 6 islands. Many of them are being refurbished into museums. The caves are what makes this place absolutely incredible. Has anybody been to see any of these sea caves? It's unbelievable. You know, created from centuries of wave action, freezing and thawing. There's arches and chambers, and it's just, I can't even describe it, but you'll see it in the pictures. This was 2013, and I don't know if I saw it in the news. The whole lake had frozen over, and people were walking out on the lake to see the sea caves. I mean, this, hundreds and hundreds of people would go out walking to see these sea caves. So this was a beach where we packed up and put in, and that was our first view of some of the caves. This was on the shoreline. And it wasn't a cave, it was these rock ledges that were so huge that you couldn't even get a sense of their size without having a kayak in the picture to give it some kind of understanding of size. you could easily go through, a lot of these were arched and you could go through them, and some of them just catacombed way inside. It was just beautiful, and the water was so clear. The caves are mostly because it's sandstone is what the islands are made of, and there are still a lot of remnants of quarrying. They used to quarry the sandstone for a lot of monuments and stuff in Michigan and Wisconsin, and you can still see a lot of the remnants of that around. So we were lucky we had really good weather. Only one day was it kind of choppy and you'd have a lot of reverberation coming out of the caves, because there are times when the wind picks up and you can't even get in the cave. We were able to stick our nose in all of them because it was really, that was about as rough as it got when we were on the water. One really rough day we decided to get off. And when it wasn't caves, the colors of the layers of rock, my pictures just don't do it any justice at all because it's not a great camera, but it's just the colors. All the rocks are striated with different colors, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And the lighthouses all being moved up. And what's interesting is on the islands, you'll have one side of the island, the northern sides, that will be all caves and windswept and really rough like this. And then the other side, sometimes it'll be a beach or forest all the way to the water. So even just circling an island was pretty incredible how things would change. You would have these rocks just sticking out. I mean, there's Scott. Look at the size of this rock. And he was able to paddle all around that thing. Look at that rock. Oh, it's just crazy. There. Also, growth everywhere. Flowers everywhere, wildflowers everywhere, moss, lichen, ferns. Look at this. Just unbelievable. And just in the middle of the water would be a huge rock with trees growing out of it. Here again, there's John. It's just absolutely huge. You wonder, could any of these fall over? Yeah. How true. Because, and they're sticking out, and you can't get a sense of that, but sometimes you would look up and go, You can just imagine how the ice and the waves and everything has just really transformed this. So there's bears on the islands, and this was in the campground. This is where they wanted you to put your food. It's a bear vault for you to put all your food. This was at one of the campsites, and we were lucky enough. And the bears have been well studied on this island, and they do a lot of DNA. They've set up, I was reading about this, barbed wire fences purposely to capture bear hair off their trail. And then they're able to know who's mama, who's dad, who's baby, how many generations we have. But the bear population is just always changing. But they're studied, well studied, and we had a bear sighting, my first ever bear sighting. This is the bear. I, of course, stayed way back. I could not believe how close these guys with their cameras got. But I was excited, but not wanting to go anywhere near this little bear. He wasn't very big. I think we were figuring he was maybe 300 to 400 pounds at the most. And he eventually just ran back up that hill. Clear water. So this is not very deep, because you can see it's dry up at the top. But this was further out. This is at least 6 feet deep.
Wow.
When I did my trip to Newfoundland, I collected rocks because they were like this, all different colors, and then I grabbed a scoop of these and I have a bowl for my rock collection. And, just because it's just beautiful. And I mean, you would see this 20 feet down while you're paddling over it. The trip was, the apostle part of the trip was really relaxing. We never really had more than 12 or 15 mile days, and it was slow going. We put our noses in and out of the caves and just had a great fun time. And this is the little spot tracks from my trip that shows we actually did go around the whole island and went all around these little islands. The slideshow. I was so taken by Royale that I had decided I have to go back. Very few places do I think I want to do over because I'm getting old and how much time do we have, right? But I would love to go back to Royale and spend at least a month, if not more, there, and not just paddle. Because all of these campgrounds, you could easily just leave your boat, lock up your stuff somehow, and then go on a 2 or 3 day backpacking trip and then come back. And that's what I would love to do. So that it's back on my bucket list sometime. So if anybody thinks they might want to do an Royale trip, that's one I think I would do. And now I have great friends. In fact, they said they could get me a 50% discount on the ferry. All I have to do is let them know I'm coming. So, all right, any questions? Okay, so I hope that you all think about giving a presentation of some of your adventures. Because I know whoever does the programs works really, really hard to find people to give these programs. And although we have really good educational programs, I like to hear what people are doing and see where they're going so that I can maybe, that's one of the ones I want to go to. So I really encourage everybody. It wasn't that hard to put together a slideshow to talk, even if it's just a day trip, because we got wonderful day trips right now. Okay. Thank you.